Welcome to In the Garden, and good morning. I'm Melissa Siegel, your moderator and a Montgomery County Master Gardener. Our experts today are Jeanette Proudfoot, Montgomery County Parks Brookside Garden Children's Garden, and Steve Dubick, Montgomery County Master Gardeners Coordinator for the University of Maryland Extension. Master Gardeners provide many services to the public in Montgomery County. We offer children's programming, such as our garden at the White Oak Community Center and the Children's Garden at the Audubon Naturalist Society. Our therapeutic horticulture program consists of volunteers visiting adult care homes and other care facilities. We lead gardening projects and provide education to the residents, and we visit over 22 different residential locations. Our Ask a Master Gardener program provides answers to your gardening questions in several locations around the county, such as libraries and farmers markets. We have a speakers group, and our volunteers speak on a variety of topics to garden clubs and other organizations. And we have several demonstration gardens around the county, including our demo garden in Durwood at the Agriculture Farm Park. It's free to visit and features many different gardens, such as the Autistic Children's Garden, the Shade Garden, where we feature all kinds of plants that grow in shade, our native plant, vegetable, and pollinator gardens, to name a few. And we also offer special events during the growing season. So let's get started. Jeanette Proudfoot is a horticulturist at Brookside Gardens. She said she's been playing in the dirt for almost 20 years. Before she came to Brookside, she was an organic vegetable farmer and worked closely with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, entering back into the field of horticulture after farming. She's been able to incorporate many of the methods of sustainable agriculture into her gardening practices. The Children's Garden at Brookside is one of her favorites, where the young guests are able to play with plants and connect with their environment. Good morning, Jeanette.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Will you talk to us about Brookside Gardens Children's Garden?
Yes, my pleasure. Yes, Children's Gardens. Oh my goodness. Brookside Garden is a public garden, and if you've ever been here, it's like so many of our displays and gardens, they're usually hands off to the public. We don't want visitors to tromp around. We don't want them to smell or pick the flowers. So the Children's Garden is a place where it's an intentional space where children can actually get up close and personal to plants. They can touch, feel, smell, pick, and most importantly, play with plants and engaging in that natural environment. That's very important especially for our youngest visitors to have that fully immersive sensory experience. There's a lot of research out there that talks about how it's literally connecting that experience, that positive experience in their brains and in their hearts with nature. And so it's the importance of connecting children to their environment, to their own place in this world, is one of the best features of that garden. It's not as easy as like slapping a playground down outdoors. It's an intentional space, and even though we do have education components of it, we have informative signage in the garden. It's also, but more importantly, they're learning from that hands-on experience that is so critical, especially in the early years. So I'm going to show you some pictures of our children's garden here at Brookside and sort of walk you through the different features of it and talk about how it's important to kids. Okay, so the children's garden here at Brookside changes themes every 5 years. The current theme is Explore Maryland. So I really love this theme in particular because it's teaching kids about their immediate environment, the state that they're growing up, their landscape that they're growing up in. And so even though they may not be completely aware, or they're not reading the informative signs, they are experiencing a white oak. They're playing with the acorns. they're observing the 80 different pollinators that are in the pollinator garden. They're cooking with some of the herbs and the flowers in the nature center and then nature kitchen. So we have, in this garden, we have it divided into 3 different regions, which correspond with the 3 different regions of Maryland. So there's the mountain region, there's the Piedmont, the farmland area, and then the coastal range of Maryland. And let's see. It's divided into 3 here. And the first one is the mountain range that you walk into. And kids can climb the rocks, the boulders. They can jump from log to log. And indirectly, it's decorated with native plants. So maybe they don't recognize them or can't name them by name, but they're getting to know them. They're observing them. They're playing with them. So this is the mountain area. We've also got an educational, informative signs. I've never seen a kid read the signs. So that's what's important about the hands-on experience with some of this. So they might not be reading about how the white oak is Maryland state tree and it's home to 557 different species of caterpillars and acorns feed 100 different species of animals. They might not be realizing all that, but they're playing with the acorns. They're realizing that, a squirrel uses the acorn for food. And they can see that. They also can see, we have some information, but we also have activities and actions that you can do as well. So one of the favorite activities is to find the animals that correspond to that environment. So they seek and find these animals that were hand-drawn by our exhibit shop, like a bear, a bobcat in the mountains, a blue heron in the coastal plains. So even though they might not be reading these signs, they are aware that those animals are animals that they can see here in Maryland. The next is the farmland area. This is the bulk of the garden. And again, here's some of the signage. And though they may not read it, they are taking the flower petals from the pollinator garden here, and they're using it to cook with, and noticing, the caterpillars, the swallowtails on the parsley, the finches in the garden. Some of the other favorite features of the garden is this tractor here that was taken from wood from Brookside. And we made a tractor out of it. This is I got this from a tractor junkyard. And then we've got an Eagle Scout project on the right of the screen is a beehive, a bee hotel. And the Eagle Scouts did that for us. And also these birdhouses was another Girl Scout project. So we're working closely with the schools and with some of the Scout groups. This is one of our gardeners, one of our horticulturists here who helped me construct the tractor. And this is the nature garden, or the nature kitchen. It's a huge feature, very popular feature of the garden, minus the pruners there laying on the bench. But kids love this, that they can dig in the soil, that they can cut the herbs that are growing in the troughs, and bring it over to the house, and there's a little table and chairs in there, and they can pretend and play. These are the troughs that feature different crops, different cover crops that farmers use, and have herbs that are growing there all season long, and that they can use in their brews. This here is the coastal plain, and again, they're interacting with that environment, and whether or not they're reading the sign and learning about the watershed, they are, looking for these animals that are common. The terrapin, the blue heron. The boat was reused from one of our parks and was not in use anymore. So we took it. It's called a John boat, and we cut off the back end here. And kids love this. I was telling Melissa that one of the first visitors to the garden was this older couple who was just sitting here having lunch on the boat.
That's so cute.
So that is why I feel like the children's garden is such an important part. It gives children that immersive sensory experience that is so critical.
How long has it been there?
This is its 4th year. So next year will be its 5th, and then we'll be looking at redesigning.
Oh, wow. Well, it's pretty good right now.
Yes. I have a hard time coming up with a new idea.
Looks great. Thank you so much. Even though today's our last program for the growing season, you can still contact us if you have any gardening questions or about any of the programs we've mentioned on our website. The link should be posted shortly, and you can also view our previously answered questions from In the Garden on our YouTube channel. So let's go. All right, question 1 has been submitted by Sheila in Montgomery County, and her question is about hellebores. And she asks, what is happening to this hellebore? All of a sudden it flopped, and it looks like that even after a good rain. So hellebores are renowned for their durability and can tolerate many conditions, although they truly thrive when grown in a moist but well-drained soil. They're very sensitive to poor drainage, so be sure the soil drains well. They are hefty consumers of water when they're actively growing in the spring to the autumn, but not when they go into the non-active growth stage during the heat of the summer. Usually with high summer temperatures, wilting from the heat is temporary and harmless, and plants will usually spring back when watered and the temperatures ease. This has been an exceptional summer of drought and excessive rain, so stressing may flower. The plants may be stressed. Flowering plants additionally. Root rot. This could be root rot. It can cause problems such as wilting, but you might not see any early signs above the ground. So dig up the plant. You can inspect its roots and see if they're blackened or mushy. And they prefer partial or dappled shade, but they need good light to thrive. Steve, when they get this way, are they toast?
Pretty much, yeah. At the time you see them kind of wilting out, they're gone, and you need to maybe protect the other plants. So probably removing that plant is a good idea.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Our next question has been submitted by Sue, and she asks, while I was visiting my 1-year-old granddaughter in San Francisco, we took her to a botanical garden at the University of California at Berkeley. She loves leaves and flowers, but some of them may be poisonous. Are there safe touch, smell, and instantly sometimes taste gardens in our Montgomery County area? And she has a second question after that, but Jeanette?
Yes, the short answer is yes, there are. I encourage you to check the Montgomery Parks website for activities like Sensory Sunday and nature walks as well, because that really gets kids out into nature. And you often are going through and touching, feeling, learning about what's growing in their environments. But the Patapsco State Park Sensory Trail is one that I've been to, and that's a really great one. It's a 1/10 of a mile. And there's large rocks, there's raised planting boxes of fragrant herbs, and it's located in Patapsco Valley State Park. There's the Enchanted Gardener at the Miller Branch Library in Ellicott City. Most of these are free and then there's the London Town Sound and sensory garden in Edgewater that I've never been to. And those are the ones that we suggest.
Well, are there any suggestions for planting safe perennial and annual toddler gardens that also have flowers year round?
Yeah, the safest bet is to do edible gardens and many of your herbs. So I recommend herbs because a lot of them grow year round, such as like the sage, thyme, rosemary in some spots if it's protected, lavender, still have their fragrance. Also, so you can, touch, feel, and smell and play. They're also safe to eat. And then I also encourage you just to take a walk in winter gardens, because oftentimes, while you might not be touching or eating the berries and the grasses and the plumes from the grasses, if they're kept up, you can see different birds, and it can still be beautiful to walk in the wintertime. And in the early parts of the year, you can really see the birds, and you can see them going through because the leaves aren't on the trees. So it's a really nice time to observe some of the wildlife and gardens.
Thank you. All right, our next question is submitted by Anne, and she has several questions. So instead of repeating her name, I'll just go through the questions. The first one is, can you recommend some local public gardens with inspirational children's gardens?
Yeah, so a lot of these questions are going to overlap.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, our children's garden here at Brookside is free. And I also definitely recommend the nature centers. They often have programs that are suited just for kids, as a way to interact with the wildlife and some of the plants and creatures in our educational. So there's also the U.S. Botanical Garden. The Washington Youth Garden is a great one. Kenilworth Park and Aquatic Garden, Meadowlark. All of these are very close to Montgomery County or in Montgomery County. Also, as Melissa mentioned at the beginning, there's the White Oak Community Center. I don't know if you can talk more about that, but in the Audubon. Yes, so that's the first part of the question.
Great. Let's see. She says next. The children's garden at the Master Gardener Demo Garden in Durwood often features animal named plants like lamb's ears, bear's breeches, lion's mane, and white turtle head. Can you suggest any others?
Yes. There are so many plants that have like fun animal related names. Being a farmer, like dinosaur kale, green zebra, tomatoes, those are great because they're edible as well. But you can also there's also bird peppers, chickpeas, gooseberries, rattlesnake or dragon's tongue beans. So there's edible things like that. There's also one of our researchers suggested zoo gardens, which is a themed garden. And if you look that up, there's a lot of suggestions for different plants that have animal names like cardinal flower, bee balm, butterfly bush, elephant's ears. So a lot of these are really fun. And also many of them are sensory invoking, like I'm thinking of coxcomb, celosia, that kind of looks like a brain. And it's kind of cool to feel and velvety. So a lot of them have, two or three things that are beneficial.
I missed one question, and that was, are there any websites that you'd recommend that feature interesting children's gardens, especially ones that allow virtual visits?
Yes, there are. And I will give you some that I know of and that are, in the United States, but but also it might be a good time to explore. Like I know that there's some safaris in Africa that are doing virtual tours. So maybe that's one of the benefits of COVID is that some of these things are virtual. The ones that I know of is Winter Thur, which is in Delaware and is worth the trip if you can go. It's called the Enchanted Woods. They have an online tour. Denver Botanical, the Mordecai Children's Garden, the Brooklyn Botanical Children's Garden, and the MSU Michigan 4-H Club, and then the Missouri Botanical Garden are some of the virtual ones that I found.
Great. I've seen Winter Thurs and it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Okay, next question is, what are some good plants for a children's sensory garden? Plants that stimulate senses of smell, sight, touch, taste, and hearing.
Yes, one of our researchers said that the PSU extension link has a very good list for sensory plants. The ones that I recommend for sight, I'm going to read you some of my favorites. Bleeding Heart, Butterfly Weed, Pumpkin on a Stick, Celosia that I mentioned before, the Coxcomb, Bright Lights, Swiss Chard, Sunflowers are some of the ones that are, but anything really with bold colors is great for your sight sensory. Hearing is an interesting one. The first thing that came to my mind was Baptisia. It produces the seed head, and if you shake it, it kind of rattles. But Platycodon and Impatiens, jewelweed that you find out in the woods this time of year produces a seed, and you can pop the flower, and it is just kind of fun to pop. I take both my 12-year-old and my 2-year-old out, and we go through them. We're popping them as we go along. So those are those are fun. But also some of the grasses have this time of year, they have plumes on them that are soft and feathery, and just to explore different kinds of flower types than just like a sunflower daisy type. Touch, lamb's ear, of course. Coneflower has a scratchy top to it. Borage, moss, copsecomb, and cotton. Cotton is one of my favorite plants. It's beautiful at every stage. It's flower, it's leaves, it's seed head. So that one's, of course, also fun because it produces a cotton ball and a great educational opportunity to talk about this important crop as well. Smell, of course, a lot of our herbs. I won't, our plastic herbs, but also viburnum. Viburnum spice bush is our native one. It's one of my favorite smells. Catmint, lilacs, and you can do fun things with herbs. Like some of them are like chocolate mint and orange mint. To see if kids can even with oregano, you can if you're with kids, that if you let them smell it and don't tell them what it is, they come up with all different things, and it's a lot of fun to hear their responses and what that herb they've already associated dishes and cuisine with that particular herb. And tasting, of course, herbs again, blueberries. But some of our flowers that are edible, you always have to be careful because, of course, there's some that are poisonous, but some that are edible, that are flowers and fun, are like violets, bee balm, borage, the flowers of chives and basil, nasturtium, calendula are some of my favorite, and also a lot of our spring weeds, like dandelion leaves, dandelion flowers, chickweed, lamb's ear are also edible.
Cool. Are there any good books to inspire children to garden?
Yeah, there's a long list, and some of my favorites have been ones that just have also just beautiful pictures of gardens that have become some of my kids' favorites. But the Carrot Seed is is a good one. The Lorax, the turnip, tops and bottoms. Those are all good ones. I believe Bev is going to also post some other ones that are listed. Mama Mita, Lola plants, I mentioned Curious Garden. So any of those, I think are great ones for kids right now and getting them into gardening specifically.
Good. Thanks so much.
Oh, also, I wanted to mention that one of our researchers also included the Junior Master Gardener program has book awards. And so they also have a list on their website at jmgkids.us. And they post a book list as well.
So what is the Junior Master Gardener program?
I believe it is, I have not looked into it. This is actually the first time I've looked into it when one of the researchers suggested it. And it looks like it's a Master Gardener program for children.
Okay, well, we'll find out about it and get it on our next program, which is going to be next year. But anyway, let's move on. The next question is about hydrangeas. And this came in from Meredith. And she says or asks, I have a 25-year-old hydrangea called Blue. It's gotten so big that I must cut it back. When is the right time to do this? Well, first of all, if it's called Blue, it's probably Nico Blue, and that is a macrophylla. And that's important to know because there's several types of hydrangeas, and depending on the type of hydrangea, you'll want to prune them in different times. So the best time to prune hydrangea is in the winter, before the winter gets really cold, like late fall. Given your hydrangea is 25 years old and very large, it may be due for a hard renewal pruning. You achieve this by cutting all of the stems back to the ground. And if you opt to do this, you're not going to get any more blooms the year that you do the hard renewal pruning. But the following year, you'll have abundant blooms. So this happened to me. I have a 23-year-old Nico Blue hydrangea, and I cut it back all the way down, and I didn't realize I wasn't going to get any blooms. That's how I learned the hard way. But it's all grown out now, and it looks even bigger than it was before, and I've got tens of little buds that will be blooms next year. So you can look forward to that the second year. You achieve this by cutting all the stems back to the ground, and remember, you're not going to get blooms the next year, or many anyway. Hydrangeas either bloom on new wood grown in the current growing season, or they bloom on old wood from the prior season. Depending on which type of hydrangea you have, you would need to prune the plants differently. The hydrangeas blooming on old wood would flower before July, and those that bloom on new wood will flower after July. There's some varieties of hydrangea that flower on both old wood and new wood, and they're called repeat bloomers. So for hydrangeas that bloom on old wood and repeat bloomers, or hydrangeas that bloom on new wood, late fall is really the best time. This helps you to identify which stems are going to produce blooms. You can see in the photo that I've submitted where there's little buds, and that is going to be a bloom next year. So you wouldn't want to cut those all the way down again. You could, though, do pruning where you just take some of the branches if you want to lighten up the plant, and that's what I'm doing right now. And for the hydrangeas that bloom on new wood in the late winter is good. Cut the stems down to about 12 inches above the soil line. And general pruning can be done on any type of hydrangea. Just don't go crazy like I did. All right, our next question is about Crepe Myrtle, and this is for Steve. It was submitted by John in Potomac, and he says, I have a Crepe Myrtle. Let's see, hold on. I have a Crepe Myrtle planted next to my deck. Recently, I noticed a white substance on the leaves. What's wrong with my Crepe Myrtle, and how can I get rid of it?
Okay, sure, Melissa. This is a common problem that occurs in crepe myrtles, particularly older varieties, and some of the newer ones too. You get powdery mildew. Powdery mildew is a fungus, and this fungus is a little different from some of the other fungi that attack plants in that it's promoted by high humidity, not necessarily a film of water. So you can have a relatively dry year, but if it's very humid, and it often is around here, you can get a fair amount of powdery mildew. If it occurs late in the year, at this time of the year, probably just, let it ride out. But something you can try to prevent maybe being less severe next year by thinning it, opening it up, trying to get more air circulation into the area. That would help. You can rake up and destroy the fallen leaves. You can compost them, and a lot of foliar leaf spots and things like that. I think it's fine to put in the compost pile. Just leave it there. New shoots, suckering shoots coming off water sprouts. There's just shoots that are coming off higher up in the shrub. They're more prone to getting powdery mildew, and maybe some of those you want to remove. Probably a lot of them you want to remove. Some of them you may want to keep, but they're more prone to it. Certain varieties are more prone to it, as I mentioned. But it's a common problem. But this late in the year, it's not a big worry. It's mostly aesthetic. But on certain plants, powdery mildew can become problematic, like on dogwoods and sometimes on crepe myrtles, because that fungus is on the outside and it pulls out what's in it. Infects the plant material. It pulls a lot of water out, and actually sometimes can cause damage to the shoots and to the leaves and cause them to die. But it's nothing major. So I think just pruning them out, some of the really badly blighted shoots, composting those, and hopefully next year, increase the air circulation, won't be as bad. There are fungicides that are available, but generally it's not warranted in most cases for this. So I think just doing sanitation right now and starting off for next year, and hopefully it'll be better.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. Our next question is, as fall is nearing, I don't know how to care for my pulmonaria. Do I cut them back or just leave them be? I don't remember the leaves being there in the early spring. So after flowering, the flower stalks turn brown and flop over, and the initial leaves also begin to look tattered. This is in the summertime. Removing the entire flower stalk and the older leaves will encourage the plant to rejuvenate and look fresh again. More de-leafing may be necessary if the summer weather is particularly hot or dry, and foliage may look poor in midsummer heat can be cut back to the ground, and fresh foliage would produce for the cooler days of summer and fall. Since spring is usually very busy, you may want to cut back in late fall just to save yourself some time. And if you cut lungwort, which is the common name for pulmonaria, which I remember because it has lung in it, and pulmo has to do with the lungs, you cut them back to ground in the spring, you could damage the emerging flower buds that you see here. Early spring is a good time to remove winter-damaged leaves, but rather than cutting it back, pull it out carefully so you can preserve the emerging flowers. And our next question is about stilt grass, and this is for Steve. How can I control stilt grass with herbicide compliant with the Montgomery County law?
Okay. So the Montgomery County law pesticide ban really affects turf. So this is an important thing to differentiate. So if the stilt grass is in your lawn, that's where the law of the Montgomery County pesticide ban takes effect. If it's in a bed, there are products that you could use pre-emergence to do that. Most of the time, where it's going to be a problem, I think, for most people is in a lawn. In a bed, it's relatively easy to pull up. It is an annual. It's a summer annual. It's a warm season grass. It produces a lot of seed. So what you would try to do if you have it is try to reduce it before it goes to seed. But you can do that. But often around you, neighbors, other places, parks, whatever, they may have a lot of stilt grass, and you may get a lot more seed to come in there. You can use a pre-emergent in the beds. In the lawn, there's one or two products that are labeled to control it. And some of these are products that have corn gluten in there. And corn gluten is relatively high in nitrogen, about 9 to 10%. It's a good fertilizer. It's a good nitrogen source fertilizer, and it helps to stimulate the grass, and that will hopefully increase some of the vigor, may shade a little, and may reduce the severity of your infestation of stilt grass. Proper mowing. Stilt grass prefers the shade a little bit, but can't grow in sunny areas if there's enough moisture. So, short answer is there are effective pre-emergent to control stilt grass under the MoCo ban. Not really, not really. There's a product that you can use. Going back to these corn gluten products, but the corn gluten products are really a fertilizer, and when you apply it at the rate that's recommended on the label to control for stilt grass, you're exceeding the maximum amount of nitrogen you're allowed to put on a lawn by the state law. So there's a product maybe out there that doesn't release it at quite the rate, but the rate of effectiveness or efficacy of stilt grass using those products is it's something, but it's not as good as maybe some of the other synthetic products. So where I'm going is you probably have to live with getting some stilt grass in your yard. You can try to encourage your lawn wherever you can. Make sure the pH is the right, proper, and mowing at the right height. You want to go over 3 inches. 3.5 inches is better. Probably if you can go swing 4, if your wheels can get up that high, good for you. But it's going to be a challenge. So for a number of us, it's probably just going to be just expect to have some of that in there. So maybe in the future they might come out with something. But right now, what we have, I would say, is marginal as a pre-emergent, but that could change in the years to come.
And how does it get spread? Like in my neighborhood, they mow all the lawns with the same lawnmower, and now I have it in my lawn.
So it's like a lot of weeds. They're probably spread by a variety of ways and used on equipment, going from mowers from one yard to another. Certainly can be spread that way. Some of the better lawn care companies and folks that do like athletic fields for different places or golf courses try to make an effort to clean off their equipment the best they can. Maybe they used to use a leaf blower or something like that. Try to get that. The other thing I think that stilt grass does is kind of interesting is that I think the seed floats a little. So when it rains and it's in a swale, it can move relatively, down a hill or down through a swale. And you can see rapidly move around other than, relying on wind or things like that. So it does have a couple ways of getting around. So once the seed's there, all that seed does not germinate the following year. A batch of seed that's created this year will germinate over several years. And so that kind of protects the plant that if next year was a really bad year for stilt grass, the seed bank or the amount of seed in there is depleted. So if you're vigilant and you're doing hand weeding, it's probably going to take you several years to really deplete that seed bank. But if you let your guard down after a year or two, it'll build back up. So it's something you have to be very vigilant on. And this is a real problem of plant material in a lot of our parks, state parks, county parks, and so forth, trying to control this. But the good thing it does pull up relatively easily. It can tolerate being mowed in a lawn, surprisingly, too. So it's a very adaptable grass. And unfortunately, there are other grassy weeds coming our way, too, besides stilt grass. And you'll probably hear more about those in the future, too.
Great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Our next question is from Jessica. And she says, hello, I'm new to boxwood. I recently ordered some, and a few of them arrived with spots on them. But I have no clue if it's boxwood blight or something else, and I don't want to accidentally plant an infected boxwood. Here are some pictures, and thanks for any help. Steve? No, this is not Steve. This is for Jeanette.
Yeah, thanks for checking before you plant. It doesn't look like boxwood blight. And from the pictures, it looks, there's nothing concerning. The spots that you see, we think are secondary. And so plant them out. It most likely will disappear. But nothing concerning.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our next question is submitted by Eric, and he asks, what is wrong with my azalea? The leaves are browning up. Steve?
Okay, yeah, just looking at this again, some of the, it actually doesn't look too bad overall, what he's brought in. Sometimes we get some secondary leaf spot late in the year. but for the most part, his plant looks pretty decent. Particularly, one of the pictures he sent, it looks in pretty good shape. So I'm not, quite sure what he's, concerned about. Now, there is a little bit of, one picture shows a little bit of spotting on there, and it doesn't look like lace bugs. Now, lace bugs are a real common problem on azaleas. Generally, if they're found against south-facing wall, he would get those. But at this time of the year, the amount of leaf spot he has it's probably nothing to really be concerned about. And again, it's high humidity favors it. Some years it's worse than others. Next year, the weather conditions and patterns can be different. It could be worse or maybe even less without really doing much about it. So improving the amount of air circulation, if you do have fallen leaves, or shoots that are badly blighted, I would cut those. And I would put them in my compost bin. I think that's once they're in that compost and you turn it around, a lot of those fungal spores and things like that will be broken down by other fungi and bacteria there. So I don't think there's a real big concern here. I think overall things look relatively good. And I don't think there's any real worries here.
Good. Thank you. All right. Our next question is, I have 10 skip laurels that I planted to make a hedge 10 years ago. The leaves are showing signs of something eating them. What is that? You can see by the photos what she's talking about, but the picture suggests that the laurels are damaged by tree crickets and affected by a disease called bacterial pathogens. This disease typically starts in early summer with little brown sores appearing on the undersides of leaves. The spots grow and develop red borders and yellow halos, and the spots eventually fall out of the leaves, leaving behind gaping holes and tattered leaf tissue. Many infected leaves look as though someone peppered them with buckshot. Because chemical control of shot hole disease, which is hard to achieve for home gardeners, help prevent this disease from occurring by planting the shrub in a well-draining location. Prune out and destroy any infected plant tissue as soon as you notice it, and rake up fallen plant litter to prevent pathogens from being attracted to the area near your shrub. But cherry shot hole disease, the leaves have a shot hole pattern that looks like it was caused by an insect, but it's a foliar fungal disease favored by wet weather. The infected leaf tissue falls out and the holes are left behind. The damage is only cosmetic and no chemical controls are recommended. Rake up any fallen foliage and the plant will recover. I have the same problem. I did the same thing to make a hedge and mine looked that way. One year it's fine, the next year it has it. So I wouldn't really worry about what you have because it looks like mine. All right. Our next question is about persimmon trees. And I have a mature common persimmon tree in my yard that bears fruit, but it's greater than 30 feet tall. So the fruit is too high to be picked. I found a persimmon seedling in my yard that I'd like to keep as a fruit tree. My question is, how long will it take for the tree to bear fruit? And can the tree be pruned to keep it short enough that the fruit will be accessible? Steve?
Oh, wow. So yeah, the common persimmon, the American persimmon, it's a tree. It's male and female. So if you get a seedling, there's probably a 50th chance that it's male. You need the male, of course, but you probably really want is the female, and perhaps there's a male nearby. You can essentially borrow the pollen, if you will, to get that pollinated. They probably don't start producing fruit till they're maybe about 10 years old, approximately that time. You can try to keep it. The tree will get 30 feet tall or so, just like she says. So reaching the fruit is going to be difficult. You could try to remove the main leader, encourage lateral branching. That would have been probably great to do at an earlier age, as this young seedling is coming up. Probably can manage it that way to reach it. There's a short time when the fruit become ripe. It's coming up here very shortly, so this is something you could work on if you wanted to. But again, when you get a seedling, you don't know if you got a male or a female. There are cultivars of the American persimmon, but you would probably have to work a little hard to find that around here. A lot of the garden centers and fruit tree growers, they are selling the Asiatic persimmon, which is fine, and that can grow here, but the American persimmon cultivars are a little harder to find. They do exist. And the nice thing about that, generally when you buy from some of those fruit tree growers, you know what you're getting. You know that it's a female. It's probably an improved selection. But it's a great native fruit. It's easy to grow. Few diseases, few insects to get onto it. And if you like the taste, then hopefully you do. You're in luck because you will have a lot of persimmons.
Thank you. They're really delicious too. All right. So our next question, Steve, this is for you as well. It's submitted by Heidi. And she asks, probably the hardiest of figs, but is really on the border zone. I'm not doing well in winter without a really good wrap. On a west, I don't have the question here.
This is the one. Yeah, I kind of remember.
Okay. So they're saying that it's on a west wall that gets sun in the afternoon, and she doesn't know what to do this winter.
Yeah, I was looking at this one, Melissa. It's in a container. It looks a little weak. So being in a container and a fig, and they're marginally cold hardy here, I think the conservative thing, if you have a sunny area, is to bring it in at least this year and maybe in the spring to plant it out. You could plant it out now, but I think a lot of the plants that are marginally cold hard here, you really benefit from an early spring planting to get the root system established and spread out. And I think you'll do a lot better going through the winter. So the figs normally overwinter around here. We do get some cold winters periodically. There was about 5 or 6 years ago. It pretty much damaged everybody's fig, dying back to the ground. That does happen. Then it takes a whole year to regroup from that. But that's sort of the fun, or the, I don't know, excitement's not the right word about what's going to happen. Is this going to be a good fig year or not? So I would probably keep it inside this winter. Try to put a sunny location as you can. Even if it's in a garage, something where it's protected, then plant it out in the spring, and hopefully you'll get a good year next year. Some varieties are a little more cold tolerant than others. There's Chicago, which does very good. And of course, there's brown turkey. I'm not sure which variety that one is, but there's others too. And so there's a lot of other relatively good cold hardy figs around here. And if you're going to plant them, I would suggest planting several and enjoy the different kinds and take flavors and that are out there. There's a lot of good figs.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. So Bev, do we have any questions that were sent into the comments?
No, I didn't see any today.
Well, I guess not. Even though today is our last program for the growing season, you can still contact us if you have any gardening questions or questions about any of the programs that we've mentioned and have on our website. The link should be posted. You can also view previously answered questions from In the Garden on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Jeanette and Steve, for being our experts today. And our researchers for this week were Ken, Susan, Ray, Heidi, Leanne, and Mary. And also a huge thank you to Mary Barnhart for putting our programs together this year, and to Bev Carriger for working so hard to get our program on Facebook. And lastly, thank you to Steve Dubik, our Master Gardener Coordinator. Without him, we would not be here. This is the last In the Garden in 2021. See you again next spring, and thank you all for joining us.